morning, students. Hari Om. Today we are going to start with a new topic of Standard 10th of GSEB, that is India's agriculture. So, now talking about India's agriculture, as it is said that India is an agrarian country. But why India is called as agrarian country? So, the reason for that is, if you talk about ancient time, that is, since ancient time, agriculture has remained a prime economic activity of most of the Indians. So, we considered agriculture also an important resource of India. Agriculture provides employment to about 60% of our labor force. If you see here, employing majority of our population, that is 60%, while it contributes about 22% to the national income. Means, in short, it is also contributing 22% in our GNP. So, the full form of GNP is, that is gross national product. So, agriculture is feeding our large population, and agriculture not only serves food requirement, but it also supplies raw material for many industries, that is input for industries. Even out of total foreign exchange income, if you talk about total foreign exchange income, 18%, as it is shown over here, 18% exports of agriculture, and that 18% comes by exporting agriculture product. And because of that, India earns a good amount of foreign exchange by exporting agricultural products. And because of that, it is rightly said that India is an agrarian country. This is the most important part. Now you know, as 1 per hectare, agricultural yield is less than the rest of the world. And for that also certain kind of reason is there. Now India has a very good climate and geography in such that in most of the area of India, 2 or more crops can be taken annually. Other factors to support this. Listen to this sentence very carefully. In most part of the area, we can take 2 or more crops annually. And other factors to support this are, India has a very vast fertile plain. Okay? Irrigation facility, skilled and hardworking farmer. This shows the potential of Indian agriculture. As I said you, in most of the area in India, we can take 2 or more crops annually. But to take 2 or more crops annually, there are certain factors who is supporting, who is acting as a potential of Indian agriculture. That is favorable climate for round year cultivation. We have proper natural irrigation through rain and river. We have a very vast fertile plain. We have a skilled and hardworking laborers, that is farmers. And against this, okay, so because of this is the potential part of an Indian agriculture. This we are talking about potential. But if you look at the second side, even we have insufficient progress also in agriculture. But what is the reason for insufficient progress in agriculture? Now, if you talk about agriculture production in India, it is much less compared to the world. And for that also there are certain kind of reasons. Now, what are those reasons? Let's see. First of all, dependence on monsoon. Okay, it is irregular and uncertain. Traditional farming, farmers are practicing in a traditional way. They are not opting, they are not adopting scientific approaches for cultivation, as they don't show any kind of interest in experimentation. Inadequate of chemical fertilizer and modern machineries, inadequate facilities for irrigation. As if you see, our farmers are mostly poorly and uneducated. Moreover, because of this, Indian farmers are poor and they are not educated, also, they are uneducated. And as there is more population and large family, disguised unemployment plus smaller farms. In that smaller farms, as it is shown over here, disguised unemployment, that means it is a small farm where only two farmers can work, but instead of two farmers there are seven farmers working, and because of that the income has to be distributed and it cannot be taken by the two farmers who actually has to get. So in short, it comes under disguised unemployment. Educated mass opting away from agriculture. People are getting educated, but they don't move on to agriculture. Why? Because the lower status of agriculture in the society. As it is said over there, ki educated mass, the people who are well educated, they leave agriculture. Why? Because agriculture sector has a lower status in the society, and because of all these factors there is lower per hectare production as compared to the rest of the world, because we don't use proper modern machineries, where farmers are not having interest in experimentation. Big families and smaller farms are available. We have high population. Educated people are not going towards agricultural sector because they somewhere feel low status in working over there. So these are all conditions which leads to insufficient progress in agriculture. Now, if you talk about agriculture, in most part of India, agriculture is a primary activity. Why it is called as primary activity? Because that provides food grain as well as raw material for various other industries. As three types of farming are found, namely, that is primitive farming in hilly and forested area. We have intensive subsistence farming in densely populated area, and we have commercial farming. Even if you talk about Indian agriculture, as there are three cropping seasons, that is Rabi, Kharif and Zaid. Two-thirds of the Indian population is engaged in agricultural activities. If you talk about agriculture sector in India, now faces modern challenges from international competition and sectoral limitations. So this was all about an introduction part of an agriculture. Moving on further, the main agenda for this section is that we are going to study about types of farming and modern methods of farming. So let us study in detail now. The first most important type of farming which we are going to study is shifting zoom cultivation. As if you talk about shifting zoom cultivation, it is most probably performed by the nomadic tribe. Okay, and in this type of farming, what is happening? What takes place is, first a piece of forest land is cleared by cutting the trees and burning trunks and branches. Afterwards, in that place, the crops are grown for more than 2 or 3 years. Once the fertility of the soil reduces, the farmers are leaving the land and they start farming with the same method in some other land. So this type of farming is called as zoom farming. Okay, so it is particularly called as zoom farming. Here the per hectare production is low, means whatever the production is less in this type of agriculture. Most probably, if you see in this shifting agriculture, cereals and vegetables are grown in this type of agriculture. So in short, what is shifting agriculture? That is what they take a piece of land, they clear that land by cutting down the trees, they are burning the trunks and branches, they are farming over there more than two or more crops. Okay, that also for 2 to 3 years. But once the fertility is reducing, they are leaving the land and going, and they start same farming with the same method on some another land. So in short, that is called as zoom farming. And always remember, in shifting agriculture, the production is less in this type of agriculture. Now moving on to the next, that is dry farming and wet farming. Now talking about dry farming, if you talk about dry farming, in dry farming, the farming is done by using the moisture accumulated within the land. Therefore, it is known as dry farming. Dry farming is the farming where it is done on this using, okay, dry farming is the farming which is usually done by using the moisture which is accumulated within the land, okay, and therefore it is called as dry farming. Dry farming is done in area where rainfall is less and irrigation facilities are also inadequate. Here in dry farming, only one crop is grown. Remember this. In dry farming, only one crop is grown through dry farming. People who practices this dry farming, the people who are practicing the dry farming, they grow crops like jowar, millet and pulses. In Gujarat, talking about particularly in Gujarat, wheat and gram are grown in humid soil. They are grown in humid soil, but in post monsoon. Post monsoon means after the monsoon is over. So in short, dry farming is the farming which is been done using the moisture accumulated within the land. Therefore, it is called as dry farming. Now talking about wet farming. Wet farming is the farming which is carried in area where they are receiving heavy rainfall or a good or an adequate irrigational facilities. Therefore, it is called as wet farming. But in wet farming, two crops are taken. Under the wet farming, two crops are taken. But in case of less rain, in case if there is less rainfall, the second crop can be cultivated. Okay, the second crop can be taken using irrigated water over there because adequate facilities for irrigation is present, and more than one crop can be taken with the help of irrigation water, with the irrigated water. Now the crops grown in wet farming is paddy, sugarcane, cotton, wheat and vegetables because it requires more amount of water. Now particularly why I have mentioned these two topics together in the slide, the reason for that is I have shown here the comparison. If you can see in dry and wet farming rainfall says that it is carried out in the region of less rain. Wet farming rainfall says that it is carried out in the region, as wet farming says that it is carried out in the region of heavy rain. Now, if you talk about dry farming irrigation, less facilities is there for irrigation in dry farming. Adequate facilities for irrigation is there in wet farming. If you talk about cropping pattern, here in dry farming, only one crop is grown, and in wet farming, more than one crop is grown with the help of irrigation. Okay, even though in wet farming, if less due to some problem, if there is less rainfall, they can take another crop with the help of irrigated water. If you talk about the examples of the crops, that is jowar, millet and pulses, and in wet farming it is paddy, sugarcane, cotton, wheat and vegetables. So this was all about your dry farming and wet farming. Moving on further, now let us talk about subsistence farming. Now when you talk about subsistence farming is the farming which is done on a very small farms. And it is a farming which is not only done on the small farms but using simple and basic tools. They are using very simple and basic tools, and therefore it is called as subsistence farming. Why? Because the farmer doing this farming, the farmers who are practicing subsistence farming are very poor. So they cannot afford good fertilizer also, quality seeds also, and even pesticides also. And because of that, what happens? They are very poor, they are not able to afford good fertilizer, quality seeds and pesticide. So therefore the production out of this farming, whatever farming they are doing, the production is very low, and that is consumed mainly by the farmer and his family. So whatever production they are doing, what they do, they produce things, they produce crops over there and they consume themselves only, because they don't have that much production to sell it out. So this is the status of subsistence farming. Now talking about intensive farming. When you talk about intensive farming, now intensive farming is the mechanized way of farming. Intensive farming is the mechanized way of farming through utilization of increased irrigation, you can say, use of chemical fertilizer, insecticides and other mechanical equipments. As cash crops, areas are shown under these crops has increased. Okay, so this, in short, intensive farming is been done using all mechanized tool, proper irrigation, chemical fertilizer, pesticides. Therefore it is known as intensive farming. If you talk about cash crops like cotton, tobacco, rubber are all grown more in this type of farming. Due to intensive farming, due to more farming, okay, due to using mechanized tool, our per hectare production and net shown area has increased drastically. If you see, the per hectare production, okay, has increased very much over here, and the area shown under this crop has also increased. So the more importance is given to economic returns in this type of farming. So here whatever economic return is given is giving more importance, and therefore it is known as commercial farming. Again I am saying, as here, as more importance is given to economic return in this type of farming, that is intensive farming, so therefore it is also known as commercial farming. Now again, if you see in this slide, I have compared two farmings together. It is subsistence farming and intensive farming. And the reason for that is, if you see economic status in subsistence farming, there is poor economic condition of farmer. If you see economic status in intensive farming, the condition of farmer is very rich. If you see land holding, you have small holdings towards subsistence, you have large holding towards intensive. If you see method, they are practicing traditional method of farming where they don't use HYV seeds, or they don't use fertilizer or insecticides. But in intensive farming, they are using modern methods of farming. They use fertilizer, pesticides and HYV seeds. Okay. And if you talk about labor, family or community labors in subsistence farming, you can, and if you see in intensive, they are hiring the labor over there. If you see purpose, life maintenance or self consumption, because they are poor, they are consuming itself. Food crops are grown, but they are using for life maintenance, and they are using for self consumption. Okay, and if you see in intensive farming, you can see that the purpose is for economic returns. They are thinking about the profit. Okay, they think about the profit over there, cash crops and food crops. Therefore intensive farming is also called as commercial farming. If you see output where the production is very less, and if you see output in intensive farming, the production, the per hectare output is very high. So this was the differentiation between the subsistence and intensive farming. Now moving on to the last farming, that is plantation farming. Now talking about plantation farming, plantation agriculture, this is a special type of commercial agriculture, you can say, as plantation agriculture means farming of trees or bush. If you talk about plantation agriculture means farming of tree or bush, where you require lot of capital, technological knowledge, you require good fertilizer, irrigation facility, transport facility, managerial skills, etc. are needed for plantation agriculture, where you have to do proper management. It also takes long time to grow plantation crops, and it requires lot of care. As it is said, skilled laborers are required over there because it has to be handled with great care. Okay, after that, if you see that rubber, tea, coffee, cocoa, spices, coconut and different fruits like apple, mango, oranges, amla, kharek, etc., this all are grown through plantation agriculture. But this agriculture is mostly practiced in the hilly regions, as it is shown over here, that is interference of agriculture and industry. So in short, plantation agriculture is the agriculture where they are farming trees or bush. Okay, plantation agriculture means farming of trees or bush, but it requires lot of things to do this agriculture. We should have lot of capital, technological knowledge, good fertilizer, irrigation facility, transport facility, managerial skills, managing everything properly. So all these things are required in plantation agriculture, because this agriculture requires high capital investment also, inputs and machines also, protection from all sides also we require skilled labor also, because of greater care it should be handled. Okay, because in this plantation agriculture great care should be taken. It requires lot of care. Okay, so this is what called as plantation agriculture. So this was all about your types of farming, as we have studied about shifting agriculture, dry farming, wet farming. Then we have studied about subsistence farming, intensive farming, last about plantation agriculture. So in short, we have 6 types of farming. I am repeating again, the 6 types of farming are subsistence farming, intensive farming, dry farming, wet farming, plantation and shifting farming. So these are your 6 types of farming. Thank you very much.